90% of customers today start their search where? Where do they start the buying process?
Online.
Online, right? 90% of consumers. So it's a lot of folks, right? It's almost everybody today is an internet customer. The second thing you notice is that they spend a lot of time online. You know that today the average shopper shops a dealer. They only shop about 1.5 dealers on average. 2 years ago, that was about 3 dealers on average. So what that means is we see less traffic, right, walking through the front door today. Most of that traffic now is online. So they also are looking at 26 different websites. So they're doing a lot of research. And I don't know, over the last couple of days, getting prepared to talk to them about this car, I spent a lot of time online. And I did a lot of searching. Camry versus Accord. Camry versus the competition. 6-speed automatic transmission versus CVT, right? And what's interesting is a lot of the third parties pick the Honda Accord 13 model over Camry and overall performance, ride quality, etc. We have, though, a lot of advantage, right? When you take a look at engine, you look at interior, room, front seat, back seat, cubic feet of trunk space, overall fuel tank capacity, the cars are almost equal. It's very, very, maybe Camry wins here, Accord wins there, but overall the cars are very, very similar, right? So there's not a big difference there. But what I want to do is share with you today what are the differences, right? And give you some of the big talking points. First of all, we know Camry is the best-selling car how many years in a row? 15 out of 16 years, #1 selling car in America. Now what's interesting is Toyota says, you saw those numbers up there, who's in the lead today? Accord. Bob Carter from TMS is guaranteed the Camry will be the #1 selling car in America in 2013. How do we get to that, right? Right now, based on where we're at, if you take the retail sales and some of the fleet business that we do, a very small percentage, we're actually in the lead here today. But what it will take back third quarter and fourth quarter will take a lot of money. And I don't care how nice this car is, you put $2,000 on the hood of Camry, what happens to it, right? We sell it, right? So I do anticipate over the next few months, I do anticipate a greater incentive than even what we have today, right? And you'll find that our incentive is more aggressive than what anybody has out there. Kevin talked about 90% of these cars are still on the road today. Of the cars that are sold in the last 10 years, 90% of them are still on the road for Camry. What does that mean? That means that when folks buy a Camry, they keep it, they drive it, they pass it down to friend, relatives, neighbors, children, right? These cars last a long time, you know that. And then also, everybody knows that the Insurance Institute Highway Safety rates the Camry a 5-star rating, and this car a 5-star rating. This car gets what they call a plus rating. A little extra plus rating due to the Camry driver's side impact. There was minor intrusion into an interior cabin, right, and an offset crash test. So 5-star plus, 5-star, what's the difference? Not a whole lot of difference. Just driver compartment in a collision is probably unlikely to happen with the way the Insurance Institute tests the car. There's a lot of accolades out there. First one is IntelliChoice. They rate it what they call a smart choice. Retained value. We have a greater retained value over a 5-year period, so overall cost of ownership to own that car is a lot less inexpensive to own this car. We'll talk about the details of that. The other was maintenance cost. What do you think it costs to maintain this car over the first 2 years of ownership? Just to change the oil, what does it cost? 5 services over 2 years, what does that cost? Okay, right? It could be $300. We could perceive it to be $500. A customer could perceive it to be what? Maybe $1,000. Who knows? Right? We need to ask a consumer that. What do you think it would take to maintain your car over 2 years? If they say $600, you can agree with it, right? Well, one thing about the Toyota Camry, for 2 years and $25K, you don't have to spend what?
Nothing.
Any maintenance dollars, right? This car doesn't have 2-year, $24,000 on maintenance. KBB says 92% of KBB users and Edmunds users that bought Toyota Camry said they would prefer a friend to buy a Camry as well. So what does that mean? When somebody buys a Camry, they're satisfied with it, right? And KBB also rated the Camry the 2013 best value. So overall, value to value, we went out versus the competition. So what is the difference between an SE, let's say we're looking at an SE 4-cylinder, and we're looking at a Accord Sport. What do you think the difference in MSRP? Do we have a higher or lower MSRP than them? Lower. By how much? Anybody know? It's about $800, right? So just right off the bat, if we're looking at an SE 4-cylinder and a Sport 4-cylinder, we're $800 cheaper, right? And do you think right now Accord's negotiating pretty aggressive deals? Or do you think they're asking for all the money? They're asking for all the money. So from a discount standpoint right now, maybe that savings is even greater, right? So one myth is that, hey, the Camry's a little more expensive than a car. That is false, right? We're actually less than expensive. If you're looking at a base model Accord, 6-speed manual, versus our base model Camry, they are a little less than expensive. But as you go up in model, we're actually cheaper than they are. So let's keep that in mind, okay? So let's talk about incentives. On the Camry today, we have how much customer cash? $1,500. How much customer cash do they have?
Zero.
None, right? So we're $800 less in MSRP, plus if you take the customer cash, $1,500. Who has the better deal by far, right? But it can't. So, hey, I understand, hey, they got a new car, no discount, right? We've got a car that, you know, is in its second year. Who has the better value? We really need to hit that home, right? $800 and less dollars plus the $1,500 rebate. And what other offer do we have on Camry? If you don't take the $1,500, you get what? Okay, now where's the card at 60 months? Does anybody know? 0.9. You're at 0.9 for 36, and they're at 1.9 for 60. Now, 2 points of rate makes about $12, $13 difference in payment, about $7, $8 per point of interest rate. So we've got some savings there, right? So we're lower MSRP. We've got a $1,500 rebate. If you take the APR, they're 1.9 for 60. We're 0 for 60. So who has the better deal? Okay. Let's talk about the lease. We're at $199 lease with $992 at signing. $999. Now we know the $999 also you include what? Tax, title, and license, right? Now whereas Accord, similar equipped vehicle, where are they on your leases? Anybody know? Because I want to know my competition. Anybody know where they're at? They're at $219 a month or $2,300 down. Now they're also going to ask for what? PT&L, right? So we're at $199 with $999 dues. They're at $219 with $2,300 down. Now with zero down, you're at $289. Now they're also going to ask for what? Tax, driver license. So a couple grand down, you're at $289. With a couple grand down, we're at $199. So it's still very, very aggressive. All right, so let's talk about peace of mind. We know the first thing is we've got 2-year, 24,000-mile Toyota Care. And I would hope that, you know, you continue to make Toyota Care very aware to your consumers. What's interesting is we did a little deal with a dealership not too long ago where we called consumers who had Toyota Care that hadn't been back to the dealership to take advantage of the complimentary service. And we reached out to about 20 customers via phone call, and it's amazing that 6 or 7 of the bunch didn't know that they had it. So we want to still make sure that we really, really communicate this benefit to our consumers and whatever their perceived value is, right? You could value it at $200. If they think it's valued at $600, let's let it be at their perceived value, all right? What also does Toyota Care come with? It's peace of mind. Roadside assistance, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? It helps me if I have a flat tire. It helps me if I lock my keys in my car. If I run out of fuel. If I have a jump start, right? That's a huge benefit. Does anybody know what AAA costs? I got to go out and buy AAA for huh? What is it? 49 Papa Lock, right? Now, if I need to go out and get a membership to AAA every year, does anybody know what it costs me? It's not cheap, right? It might be a couple $100 a year. Let's say $50 a year. That's $49, right? Whatever it is, we've got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, roadside assistance. All right, so we talked about cost of ownership. If Toyota Camry depreciates over a 5-year period about $730 less than the Accord. Not a lot of those, but let's say $750, right? So we have less depreciation in the Camry than we do Accord. Plus we have the 0 versus the 1.9. You got a little more money to insure this car over that car from the insurance rate standpoint, and then you have no maintenance costs. So what's the overall cost of ownership savings to a consumer driving a Camry versus an Accord? Anybody know? $2,000, right? A couple of grand. So there's some substantial benefits there. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about the rear seat. Now there's not a whole lot of difference, but just in the rear seat height, there's about a ½ inch difference between the Camry versus the Accord. Now, this one has a 5 inch, about ½ inch less height in the back than the Camry. Also, in overall hip room, in overall leg room, a little less than Camry. It's not substantial. It's 4/10, maybe a ½ inch. But hey, the bottom line is, hey, if somebody's 6'2", you know, that ½ inch is going to come in pretty handy in the back seat, right? The other piece is, back years ago, they didn't have a shoulder strap in the center seat. They didn't have a center headrest. They're there now, right? So from a competitor speaking, they've got a very, very solid back seat. We have some advantages there. So let's talk about safety. What's the biggest safety advantage that we have in this car versus airbag, right? So what are the difference? What are the 4 airbags that we have that they don't have?
Knee airbag.
Knee airbags.
We have a driver and passenger knee airbag, right? I don't know if any of you have been in a car collision and where you have the dash intrude in and hit a knee, but it can be serious, right? It can be super serious. So how important is that knee airbag? So we really need to stress the fact that we have a huge advantage when it comes to that. Now in the back seat, what advantage do we have with the airbags? Side impact, right? So we've got the side that comes down, but we don't have the seat bolster sides in the Accord. So if you have a small child that's here, there's going to be a bag that comes down this way. There's not going to be a bag that comes out this way and protects their side, right? So that's huge. So it's kind of like back in the day when you had just the center strap in the back without a shoulder harness. You hate to say this, but what if you got 3 kids, which one are you going to compromise, right? Yeah, put the one that's mean in the middle, right? So same thing here. From a safety aspect, it's critically important. The other thing is we have what we call WIL seats. Does anybody know what those stand for? The front seats of the Camry?
Whiplash injury lessening seats.
Right? Whiplash injury lessening seats. In the Accord, they don't have those. So you have a huge advantage there. So you're in a 30-mile-per-hour impact. It can be critical having those seats versus not in the Accord. So let's talk a little bit about interior. All of you have been in a Camry. What do you see the difference between the dashboard versus what you see in the Camry? So you don't have the stitch. We've got kind of a multi-layer stitch dash, right? There you've got kind of a simpler dash. What else do you see?
No touchscreen display.
No touchscreen display, right? The other thing I see is when you look at the knobs and overall ergonomics, you can just see the radio knob. It's right here. Relative to Camry, the dials are a little larger, easier to get to, a little more ergonomically designed in the Camry than in this vehicle. You've got a more premium feel to the Camry versus this one, right? Hey, it's nice put together, I can tell you, versus the Altima, it's a lot nicer, right? It's got good fit and finish, the pieces fit together, you're not going to get a lot of rattles and squeaks over time, but overall feel and look, we've looked like we've got a much more premium dash and much more ergonomically designed. You talked about this cross stitch, right? The stitch dash, which gives it a nice look. We've got the cluster interface that's up front. It's easier to use when you sit in the Camry and you're operating the cruise and all the bells and whistles. It's easier to get to and very well laid out controls. So we've got some huge advantages there. So does anybody know what kind of transmission this car has in it versus the Accord?
6-speed versus CVT.
Okay, you got a 6-speed automatic transmission versus a CVT. Does anybody know what some of the advantages, disadvantages of a CVT are?
Advantage, higher fuel economy.
Better fuel economy, less moving parts, right? It's simpler. It's basically a pulley system. What are some of the disadvantages of CVT? Somebody know?
Generally lack get up and go.
Lack get up and go. If you got a heavy foot and you like to take off fast, right? You don't see CVTs in really high torque or high horsepower vehicles. We do have CVTs in Toyota. Does somebody know what vehicles it's in?
Prius.
It's in Prius.
All hybrids, actually.
All hybrids, and it's in the IQ. It's coming in the new Corolla, right? But do you see a CVT in a Tundra? Right? There's some reasons why we don't have CVTs. CVTs have come a long way, but some of the advantages, I'll call these out right quick. You don't see CVTs in high horsepower, high torque vehicles. Lack of gear changes. If I want to get in the car like an SE and I want to feel the car, right? Every time a gear shifts, I get a rev in the engine. I get to enjoy the performance of the product. In the CVT, I don't feel that, right? So if I'm in a sport Honda versus an SE Camry, I'm going to get more sport ride, right? It has a higher rev range in this car. What you'll find is sometimes the transmission actually slips like if anybody's driven a manual transmission, you get clutch slippage. That's what it feels like in a CVT at times when you really step on the gas. Some of the advantages you talked about in simplicity, right? Better fuel economy. It's a little more efficient. And it has pulleys basically connected to a belt. That's how it operates. So less things that can go wrong over time. But I tell you, the transmissions that we have are proven, and they've held up to the test, and they're 6-speed automatic transmission versus the CVT. All right, so what do we have on this car that can protect me when I'm changing lanes? It's an option.
Blind spot monitor.
Okay, does anybody know what this car has? It has a camera in the side view mirror. It's pretty unique. So I have a backup camera that's standard, and then when I go to change lanes, if I put my right-hand blinker on, this camera pans out and shows me what's on the right-hand side. Now what does it do for me on the left-hand side? Anybody know? What does it do for me on that side of the car if I'm taking a left? My eyeballs got to go to work for me, right? I got to turn my head. But visibility-wise, I have better visibility on the left. I don't have quite the visibility on the right, so that's why they offer this camera. Pretty unique. It's a neat feature, but we have blind spot monitoring. So if that's a big concern for a consumer, let's upgrade them to blind spot monitoring and protect both sides of the car when I go to the turn in the right lane, the left lane. So let's talk about the front of the car right quick. And when you lift the hood of the Camry, and this is kind of is interesting why they wouldn't put a hood strut, but you feel that hood right there. See how heavy that is.
Oh,
And you have no hood strut.
it is heavy. Oh yeah, I do.
Somebody grab a hold of that thing.
It's heavy. I'm telling you.
You have no hood strut, right? So what's the disadvantage of not having the hood strut?
Safety.
They're lifting up. What if this thing's not put in properly? Be serious, right? So again, it's something little, but it's something we can really talk about. Mr. Customer, you know, hey, I know these cars are very similar, but let me just tell you, one key advantage, you're probably at times you're going to be checking your oil, you're going to be checking your washer fluid. Mr. Customer, your wife's going to probably be up underneath there. And what would you rather have, these hood struts, or when you go over there, this big heavy hood that perhaps could fall down and crush a hand? Somebody could be underneath there. I mean, it could be a problem, right? All right. So let's talk a little bit about just overall. What are some of the things you heard that you could talk about Camry versus Accord when somebody says, hey, I'm looking at the competition? First of all, we'd want to say, hey, you know what? They got a nice product, right? It's a good car. So you never want to bash the competition. Why? Because they could be owning a car. It could be in their driveway at home. It could be parked out front. You never know, right? So let's talk about some of the advantages. Henry, give me one.
Of the Accord?
Camry versus Accord. So Camry has the advantage. I'm looking at the Accord.
Okay.
Tell me why I'd want to buy that Camry over this product.
Definitely better total cost of ownership on this Camry.
What do you mean by total cost of ownership?
Well, it costs you less to own a Camry than an Accord.
Do you know how much that is?
The excess of about $2,000.
About $2,000. Okay.
Yeah, you got the auto care, 2 years, 25,000 miles, all change tire rotation that the Camry offers that the Accord does not offer.
So I'm gonna have to pay for my maintenance on this car?
Definitely.
Okay, I think I'd rather the Camry.
Yeah.
All right. George, you have something? Safety features, what do you mean?
We want your family to be in a more protected cabin. If I had my kids in the back, I want to make sure they're safe. My wife's sitting up front. If that engine is forced toward me, I want to make sure airbags that protect me.
Now, how many airbags do you have in that car?
You have 10, but on this one you only have 6.
6.
And I prefer to have these airbags to protect me because my neighbor had an accident and they won't be able to walk for the rest of their life.
I think
If they're in a wheelchair.
I think I'm gonna hold off on my purchase on any car. I don't want to get in a wreck. All right. Anybody else? Give me a benefit. Accord versus Camry versus Accord. One thing.
She has an Accord. The wrong
I have an
side.
Accord, but
What do you see? Day-to-day driving versus a Camry. What do you dislike about the car?
I don't like the it has less pickup and go. I don't like it.
Okay, so probably CVT transmission versus 6-speed automatic transmission. You step on the gas, you don't get quite the feel you do in acceleration with a 6-speed automatic versus a CVT.
Is this their first year with CVT?
I believe it was 4-cylinder.
That's probably something. First time at it, probably messed it up.
Yeah, CVTs are really not proven like what we see in a 6-speed automatic transmission. They've definitely gotten better the last few years. They definitely put some doubt, right, in the consumer's mind of a CVT, right? If it's such a great transmission line in a half-ton truck, right? So, again, advantages. What else?
The Camry will give you a whole lot of that ride. I've seen all the Toyota Corolla versus Civic and Camry versus Accord. There's sometimes it's a manual, it's a turn, but a lot of people have to drive it.
Okay.
It's a slip suspension.
When you look at ride quality, I drove the car last night, from Mandeville and back. I've had a chance to sit in the Camry. They're very comparable, right? Very, very comparable. Yeah, very, very comparable. So again,
Up until this year, at least, I know that for several years, when they would cut corners, they'd take insulation, they put it back in out from the hood, from the trunk, and I heard people say it was very loud inside. And also, it was a rough ride. It was very smooth. You're saying you couldn't tell the difference now?
yeah, there's not a whole lot of difference actually. So I'm thinking about leasing. So what are the benefits if I lease the Camry over the Accord?
Better incentives?
Better incentives.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what kind of subvention cash is on a Camry lease right now?
1,900.
How much?
1,900.
1,900 subvention cash.
Tier 1.
Right?
On an L model, I think $1,000
Tier 1
on
plus.
LE.
Right? But 1,900 subvention cash on the LE. Now, if I'm looking at doing just customer cash, what's the advantage? 1,500 versus? Zero, right? Now, if I'm looking at doing a 0 APR on Camry, and I want to come over and buy the Accord for 60 months, what does it cost me? 1.9.
Can't you get 0 and 500
Where's that?
on a Camry?
Correct, you can, because you got some TFS subvention cash,
Right.
right? So I got
Yes, sir.
even a little extra bonus there,
Right.
right? In savings. What were some of the other things? Anything else?
The luxury.
Toyota Camry.
Better looks.
Okay, good
I
point.
do have a question. What's
Yes.
with this Earth Dreams label? What are they marketing at?
It's basically a eco switch that's on the left-hand side of the car. And basically a little better fuel economy. What you do find is with the CVT, gets a little better fuel efficient. It's a couple of miles per gallon. This car is rated at 30 average MPG. That car is rated at 28. Right? When you really get into statistics of the car, the stats, they're very, very close in MPG, in trunk capacity, and fuel capacity, and leg room, hip room, really throughout the car. So you really got to hone in on these things. Why a Camry versus Accord, right? Cost of ownership is a couple of $1,000s less, right? peace of mind, 24-hour roadside assistance, 2 years of 25K maintenance, right? We do have a bigger, larger back seat, right? If you're going to have passengers, where are they going to be sitting most of the time, right? They're going to be sitting in the back. The safety aspect, the airbags, 10 versus 6, that's huge, right? The hood struts versus no hood strut, that's big, right? So we really want to focus on 6-speed automatic versus CVT, right? And that cost of ownership piece and what the third parties say. I would challenge you to spend some time online and really look at the competition and know what they're saying, because again, that's where your consumers are spending the bulk of their time. Okay?
Why are we going with the CVT and the new road?
Fuel efficiency, right? And they've made a lot of headway with CVT. So at one point I might be saying, right, again, I might be talking really good about a CVT. Hey, it's a great product. Why in this Corolla? It's all about fuel economy, right? And the FD Sport is about fuel economy, it's about filling the car, right? It's the driving performance, right? So you're going to talk about its advantages sometimes, and sometimes you're going to talk about its disadvantages. All right? With that, Kevin done? All right, Altima, and everybody else.